All right, this video is an instruction on how to use the calculators to figure out how much fat to use with your Keto Chow. If you go to the How to Prepare Keto Chow webpage, it has information there. Some of it's a really short version, some of it's a longer version. We've got information on how to mix up the savory soup flavors or even how to use butter or other hard fats. On this page, if you scroll on down, well, there's two different places you can get your how many calories to use or how much fat to use to get the calories you want. There's this image that gives kind of a really rough breakdown. If you want 1,200 calories a day, you would use, for instance, 82 milliliters of heavy cream per shake. Or if you're doing peanut butter, it's different amounts. If you really want to get into it, the best thing to use is the custom calorie calculator. And you'll find that on a bunch of different pages on our website, but the easiest place to find it, I think, is right here. So when you click on that, it's going to open up a new window that allows you to enter in how many calories you want per day. How many calories you want per day, and then it divides that by 3. So if I put in 1,200, it splits it up into 400 per meal. If I put 2,000, splits them into 667. So I'm going to just put in 1,800 for the lack of a better thing. Now, right here at the top, don't know how many calories you need, use the keto calculator for details. So this is a website that has what I think one of the better calculators for figuring out how many calories you need per day. So let's take, for example, you're a female, you weigh 160 pounds, you are 5'8", you were born in 1980 on February 12th. Why not? So they're making an estimate that you have a base metabolic rate based on your gender, your weight, your height, and your age of about, 1,452 kilocalories per day. Now, a better way to find that out would actually be to go and get a resting metabolic rate test where they put this mask on your face and they keep track of how much you exhale, like the amount of carbon dioxide. Another way to do it is to get a DEXA scan or a bod pod. If you can get those things, it's a lot more accurate. But if you can't, or you just want to start off, using this number works really well. Now, by far, you pretty much always want to choose sedentary because it's a lot better to take into account any exercise you do in a tracking program like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal or Carb Manager. So yeah, just choose sedentary. How much body fat do you have? Well, it's estimating about 35%. The most accurate way would be a DEXA scan, or you can use a skin-fold caliper. So I'll just go ahead and put in the 35% that it's assuming. With 35%, you have 47 kilograms, 104 pounds of lean body mass. So how many carbs can I eat? Now, when it says below 50 is enough for most people to stay in ketosis, I actually recommend fewer than 20. And the interesting thing about macronutrients, so you have carbohydrates, you have protein, and you have fat. Carbohydrates are an upper limit. You should not go above this. It's not a target that you want to get to. So you don't want to go above, in this case, 20 grams of net carbs. Protein is a goal. It's something that you want to hit. And actually, you might even want to go above and beyond that. There are different formulas that different people use. In this case, it's saying you should stay above 63 grams if you're mostly sedentary. You can go as high as 104 if you put your muscles under a lot of stress or with a large caloric deficit. In this case, it's recommending the middle ground, which is 84. So if I could type in 84. Now, the interesting thing about protein is if your body needs additional carbohydrates, for instance, for your red blood cells, for other cells that have to have carbohydrates, it can take protein. Your liver can take protein and turn that into glucose. It's called gluconeogenesis, but you don't need to know that. In the past, a lot of people were concerned that if they ate too much protein, it would be pushed into glucose and stop ketogenesis. Dr. Ben Bickman, he put that argument to rest. It was about 2 years ago when he presented about insulin and glucagon. Gluconeogenesis is demand-driven. If your cells need glucose, your liver will make it. That's how it works. It's not based on the supply. And for that matter, most people are way too low on their protein macronutrient. Having additional protein available is almost without fail a good thing. So don't be afraid of protein. You can go as high as 104, but actually this 84 is probably about right. So it's important that you don't go too low on your protein, but don't worry about going too high. If you go too high, your body will just say, oh, well, let's build some more hair. That's always a good thing. So how much fat should you eat? Now, fat, on the other hand, is very interesting. When you're first starting a ketogenic diet and you're limiting the amount of carbohydrates you have, your body's used to burning sugar. And when you limit the sugar, you no longer have that as an energy source. Well, now your body wants to burn fat. But if your insulin is too high, your fat cells will not let go of the fat in order for you to burn it. So you don't have sugar to burn, but you also don't have fat. So it's important, fat from your cells rather, fat from storage. So it's important that, especially when you are starting out, that you're getting enough fat on your plate to fuel your cells so that you don't get hungry. If you have that too low, it's going to be a problem. If you have it too high, well, then your body will actually turn up metabolic processes and it'll burn that off to a certain extent. As long as your insulin stays low, getting a little bit too much fat isn't a problem. Getting too little can be an issue. So how much fat should you eat? All that said, eat fat to your liking. We've got, well, I don't know why that changed it down to, there we go, 20. So we have 20 grams of carbs, 84 grams of protein. So that covers 416 calories. So I recommend no less, or no greater rather, than a 15% deficit. So if your total calories are that you're supposed to get a day is 2,000, 15% lower than that is the lowest you should possibly ever get. And the reason for that is your body is very smart. If you don't get enough to eat, it assumes that you're going through a famine and will start turning down, well, actually the thermostat, it actually starts turning down metabolic processes. So heat genesis, growing hair, fingernails, things like that, maintenance and repair of different cell structures. It will turn those down so that you can maintain life. So what you want to do is not go much lower than a 15% deficit. And the idea is that you will be getting the difference from your fat cells. And of course, that presupposes that your insulin is low enough that you can get that out. So at the very beginning, you might actually want to go for a 0% deficit. And then as you start to adapt, as your insulin comes down over the course of about a week or two, then you can ramp that up to 15 or maybe even higher. Depends on how much fat you have to lose. If you are severely overweight with a lot of fat to lose, your fat cells will be able to supply really a lot of fat. But your insulin has to be low, and that takes a little bit of time. So at the beginning at least, err on the side of having too much fat so that your body can get used to a ketogenic diet, so that you can get over the carb cravings, and having the more calories will leave you full and satisfied so that you're able to just nail this diet. So in this case, I'm actually, since I'm assuming that I'm somebody starting off, I'm actually going to do a 0% deficit. That puts the amount of calories needed really close to 1,600 calories. Okay? So, and when we're talking about macronutrients, you don't want to use percentages. Percentages is what you would use on a ketogenic diet for the treatment of epilepsy. And with that, you actually want less than, anyway, you don't even want to get into that. We're talking about grams here. How many grams of the different things? So we're looking at 20 grams of carbohydrates, 84 grams of protein, and around 131 grams of fat. The important thing for the keto calculator on the other page is this 1,597. So we know how many calories we want per day. So we're back here. So I'm going to change this to, I could do 1,597 if I wanted to, or just round it up to 1,600. Okay. So how many calories per meal? 533. Now, it's going to ask you a bunch of questions. Okay, are you using peanut butter? The peanut butter flavor. The peanut butter has a little bit more fat, protein, and carbohydrates, so it changes around the equations. So if you wanted to use peanut butter, you could check that box, and it would change things. Okay, do you want to use butter instead of oil? Now, this is an interesting thing that we recently added as an option. Butter, well, it's slightly less calorie dense than oil. So you need 123% the amount you would use for oil for the same amount of calories. And then there's a link to how to mix it with butter using Keto Chow. So if I check that box, and I'll get to that in a little bit, it will give me the amount that I'll use for butter instead of the amount I would use for oil. So moving on down, unit of measure you prefer. So you've got milliliters, you've got fluid ounces, teaspoons, grams, tablespoons, and cups. All of these are, well, grams is actually a measurement of mass, but it was very difficult actually to be able to have grams as an option. But in this case, I'm just going to use milliliters because they're divisible by 100 and it's just so much easier and everything's fine. So if you wanted to use fluid ounces or teaspoons, you could as well. So down here below, this is where we're getting into the butter. Percentage of calories from oil or butter versus heavy cream. So if you want to do all heavy cream, you put the slider on that side. If you want to do all oil or butter, you put the slider on that side. And it will change the numbers. So for instance, if I'm doing milliliters and I want to do heavy cream to get 533 calories per meal to give me 1,600 calories a day, I need 118 milliliters of heavy cream per meal. That translates to, in case you want to know, essentially 4 ounces of heavy cream. So if you were to do heavy cream, 4 ounces of heavy cream, which is a half cup, per meal, it will give you very, very close to 1,600 calories a day. If you wanted to use all oil, now that could be MCT oil, that could be avocado oil, that could be coconut oil. By and large, with very little exception, all oils have the same amount of calories per whatever, milliliter, gram, fluid ounce, teaspoon. They're all about the same. Butter is different because it has water in it and a little tiny bit of protein. And that makes it so it's not as calorie dense. So you use a little bit more in this. It's 123% the amount of butter as you would oil. So here we go. If I wanted to do all oil to get 1,600 calories, well, it's giving me about 50 milliliters of oil. If I wanted to use some MCT oil, which I don't recommend, but you can use it. It's not something that you have to use. It's something that's out there. It's actually a bit of a lengthy discussion as to whether you should use MCT oil or not. But if you choose to, you would just substitute up to 15 milliliters or 1 tablespoon of the oil for MCT oil. So in this case, it'd be 3.4 tablespoons of oil. I could do 1 tablespoon of MCT with essentially 2.5 of avocado oil or melted coconut oil. But let's come back here to milliliters. Now, so it's 50 milliliters of oil. If I check the box for butter, there we go, 62 milliliters of butter. Or if I click on grams, it'd be 57 grams of butter. Personally, I prefer to measure my butter with a kitchen scale because you can just put a measuring cup on a scale, zero it out. Usually if you turn on the scale with the measuring cup on there, it will zero it out for you. And then you just add butter until you get to the desired amount, which I'd probably round it up to 60 and call it good. And that's it. You melt the butter, mix it in. So anyway, that's how you use the slider to determine, how much you want to use, and as far as the butter goes and all that stuff. Now, interestingly enough, if you come on down here, it's going to tell you the macronutrients per meal. So if I do regular Keto Chow, most of the flavors, not peanut butter, because if you see peanut butter, it ups the numbers. I'm looking at about 4/10 of a net carb per meal, which is crazy low. How much protein? 25.86, and how much fat? 47. Great. Now that's with all butter. If I switch it over to all heavy cream, bring that back. There we go. If I switch that over to all heavy cream, you'll notice the numbers change quite a bit. There's quite a lot more of net carbohydrates, and that's because there are carbohydrates in heavy cream. Per tablespoon or 15 milliliters, there's about 0.4 grams of net carbohydrates, and that adds up. Most of your heavy cream will show on the label or on the packaging that it's 0 grams of carbohydrates or less than 1. When you really get down into it, there's 0.4. So, and here you have why it says, why is there more fat if you use oil? It's because heavy cream has carbs and protein along with the fat. Whereas butter, on the other hand, does not. Let's see if I switch this over. It's essentially the same as using oil because you've eliminated most of the protein, you've eliminated the carbohydrates. It's just fat with a little bit of water is what you have in butter. You can actually use ghee, which is clarified butter. It's butter without the water or any protein in it. So it's more expensive. It's not really necessary. You can use it if you want to. I personally just use regular butter. So anyway, that is how to use the calorie calculator on the Keto Chow website. So if you are looking for a way to figure out how much fat to use, that's a good way to start. And right here at the top are some suggestions if you just want to try it out. Anyway, thank you and have a good day.